it sort of it enhances technophobia, I think, and we as the technologists, as you say, also make use of technology, so we shouldn't enhance technophobia at that point. And I'm talking too much, sorry. And the last point I would like to make is I'm not a totally computer expert. I wouldn't fit into your category of the independent technologist, but as a person who's dealing with technology and using technology, I can still say at some point, oh, I don't understand this, and I don't understand what's going on. And I think that's something that everyone can do. Every person who's using technology or who's at some point not understanding what's happening. So I wouldn't restrict it to these free independent technologists, but also to all the people who say, I'm dealing with this and I don't understand it, and that's bad for me because I don't know what's going on. And yeah, then the free independent technologists come into play, and they should explain what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No, totally. Just to hook on to that, and of course, everybody should be concerned with this, but we do know, but we do need the technical community in the first place to realize just what's going on. I mean, and what is going on. I mean, you do need some information about voting computers, for instance, by Rob, or you do need some background information on data retention to actually just realize that this is dangerous in the first place, because there's too much going on which you don't understand or don't see anyway. So you have to direct your attention to something, and that is something which the technical expert has to decide somewhat for you, to say that this is more dangerous than the harvesting machine which is being built there next door. Then the other point, of course, what you said on that, for instance, technologies can be used by the bad guys and by the good guys, and thus they're neutral. That's the very standard philosophical argument for the neutrality of technology, of course. It has been opposed in many ways, but one way it would be to say that technologies have a tendency to lend themselves towards certain things. Another thing is to say that you also have to distinguish the different dimensions of use, production, and development. Because then production and development are also guided by certain aims and values, and those go into the technology as well. As for instance, I have computers, for instance, use semiconductors, and semiconductors are the most poisonous thing to produce at the moment, are only being produced in very poor countries by people which in companies which don't have to apply to any work laws, and the people who are working there are very sick and get cancers all the time. And so these values go into these machines as well. You know, there's blood on my computer, so to speak. But that's a difficult argument anyway, this neutrality of technology. That's just a personal matter of taste, more or less, if you want to accept that or not. I don't. And then your other point to raise awareness within politicians, that's of course a very important thing. Thank you for that thing.
Well, I've put me on the speakers list for a second. One thing that raised a bit of alarm for me was your point about the complexity that needed to be reduced to get the layman, or to provide accessibility to laymen. Well, as a fan of Enlightenment, not the window manager, the historical period, I would rather say, wouldn't it be better in this particular case to see this from to try to change this from the people's side rather than from technology's side? I agree that certain technologies can be made more accessible, but I think once you deny there is complexity, and once you leave the people who use the technology out of the picture and just try to make technology accessible by dumbing it down, you probably lose quite a bit. And I think a fan of Enlightenment would have to say, well, let's educate the people. Let's educate the people. Let's change technology as well. Let's make it more transparent. Let's make it, Debian is more transparent than Windows maybe, because you can really see what's going on. That's a good thing. But let's resist the temptation to dumb technology down just to provide the illusion. And I think it would be an illusion of accessibility. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we're talking about the case of the introduction of technology into politics here, and and I think within politics we should try to maintain a certain simplicity, because only simplicity can really fully guarantee transparency and intelligibility for everyone, because otherwise not everyone will care about this complexity thing. And the good case in point is the voting computer. Why on earth would we abandon the system with just making a cross on a piece of paper and 3 people checking it? It's much more easy, it's very simple, and it's a political process which is very important and which can be disturbed very much by the introduction of a computer in there. So I would say that in general, I would just state that as a preference, if it is possible to have a simple thing rather than a complex thing, and if that isn't associated with any substantial loss of value or of whatever you want to achieve with that, then I would generally prefer the simple case over the complex one. And in the other case, of course, you're right. We should just maintain the complex thing and then enlighten people about the complexities in there and try to maintain transparency as good as possible.
Choices determining technological development very often happen by political choices, which are not publicly debated, if not by business. One good instance of that would be spectrum and broadcasting technologies, because having chosen one type of regulation, basically one type of technology was chosen, which had certain incumbents behind it. So I think that in this day and age, a very important point would be to create an imperative of accountability by political structures when they make technological choices, because those are things that produce basically the dominant technological environment, and those are the points where public can, within a constituted political environment, so an ordinary or ordered political environment, intervene into technological choices which are being made, and they are not being made only for the sake of technology. And a second point is that those choices oftentimes happen indirect through means of optimization. I mean, voting machines were chosen primarily through this logic of optimization, and this also has to be increasingly accounted on. So I think that we should also strive towards a redefinition of how political structures or structures of political decision-making make technological choices, and make those things account, or points in the structure account for the choices they make. So particularly when it comes to optimization, I think that it's a strong argument which oftentimes does away with the political debate as to what technologies we choose or not.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally agree with this. Maybe I should make that as a sub point of this raise awareness thing as well, that politics should be aware, of course, of the values and needs which are being introduced, also by optimization, as you said, because optimization itself has some certain values and then also is able to carry other values in there. And of course, it should be made more aware to the politicians that they are not only just optimizing a certain kind of process, but also gambling with values in these cases. So I totally agree with your point.
Okay, I'd like to ask about definitions of control, and the reason I want to ask about that is to question what you were saying about how the technologists are the kind of responsible agents for the counter development. And I would look at like privacy enhancing technologies, as in anonymizers or the Freenet, as also political technologies. I don't know if you see it as such. And in a way, these technologies are about avoiding processes of control by introducing other ways of control. So if you look at cryptography, or even, you know, anonymizer itself, most PETs are actually control mechanisms. So I wonder if there's a positive and negative definition of control, I don't know. Or is there another way of defining security or abolishing security or deconstructing security, which as a technologist I cannot do, but I would expect, for example, somebody who's read lots of Foucault to be able to give me some feedback, which I haven't done. But I'm just wondering if you have different definitions of control and security, which would help technologists question mechanisms of control, or to produce technologies that do something else. That subvert or are counter developments. I think without these ideas, it's difficult to develop technologies as well. So it's a cooperation.
Yeah, thank you for that remark. Actually, yeah, that's quite true. I mean, there would have to be some sort of proactive version of counter development, because I formulated it very negatively here in a way to more trying to disturb and destruct certain developments and things, but of course, like these privacy things which are trying to put a certain type of control to control these other people who are trying to control something else, would have to be introduced there, which would be, of course, a case to an example for restoring physicality in this sense, to try to make your communication non-interceptable and to give you back the control. But I totally agree. Maybe I should make my argument more fine-grained there and add this as some sort of a proactive thing. But I don't know if we do need to, maybe my notion of control was somewhat negative. I didn't intend that. I should probably formulate that a little more neutral. Thank you.
I would like to add that I'm also in favor of reducing complexity in our stuff more than educating people. Of course, I'm always in favor of educating people and enlightening them. That's, of course, always a very good thing to do, and also important thing. But one thing is, I believe that our technology has, and culture using it has advanced too far for the average person to be able to understand things. And it's just too big a demand that people are educated in a way that, for example, would them allow to understand the inner workings of a voting machine. And I mean, I'm not even able to educate myself as much as I would like to, and I think it's needed. So I think it's a very tough job to educate other people if you can't even do it to yourself enough. And I think there's a bit of a danger of abuse if you say that people should be educated, or if one demands that people should be educated about the high technology, because it could be said that, well, our technology is so complex, it has to be, you just have to understand it. And if you don't, then go educate yourself, and we will use it in the time being, and you don't have to understand it because we are the experts. And that is a danger, because this is a thing I think should just not be accepted. It has to be simple, and it has to be made simple, and if the technology is too complex inherently, then it cannot be used for these political means, like the voting computer, for example. Even if it would save lots of money and be fast and whatever, if it is inaccessible, and I think this is a case of full inaccessibility, because even the experts needed to do very hard and long reverse engineering to get to know what really goes on. So nobody really can know in any normal or acceptable way. So this just has to be avoided, and if it's more expensive and slower to count all the votes by hand, which actually it doesn't seem to be, then we just have to accept that and do it, because it's, well, that's just not that important as the understandability of the things by the people.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's really the thing I'm a lot in favor of. I mean, this one thing about enlightening the people. I have tried to. I'm still on it, trying to do a project within the Chaos Computer Club, which aims at precisely providing understanding and precise manuals for the public on how these things understand, to provide these translations. And the idea I had for that was to give like two different versions. Like the one version would just be very coarse and very easy understandable. Like if you use this technology, then this and this crap could happen because of these and these certain things in a very broad and coarse functional language. and then also to provide the more detailed account of what could happen for anybody